Established in 1859, Fort Larned protected the western Kansas portion of the Santa Fe Trail from raids by outlaws and displaced nations of Plains Native Americans. Join me as I make photographic art out of this fascinating place and examine its often troubled history. Welcome to Small Histories. Like we talked about before, today's video is going to be about Fort Larned, but as a bit of an added bonus, the field where I'm currently standing is a historic location in itself. Along the span of the Santa Fe Trail, there are some spots where wagon ruts made by travelers are still preserved, unaltered by more than a century of grazing and farming. This field, only about 2/5 of a mile in length, is one of those places. Starting in the early 1820s, citizens of the U.S. used the Santa Fe Trail as an overland route to trade with Mexico and later the U.S.'s Southwest Territories. The trail spanned from near Independence, Missouri to what is now Santa Fe, New Mexico, and saw continued use until the 1880s when the railroad was extensive enough to render the trail obsolete. This field sits about 5 miles south-southwest of Fort Larned. You can see multiple areas where wagon tracks are still preserved. When these tracks were made, there were few roads on the prairie, and the grasslands were largely wild. Today, this field is surrounded by plowed fields and abundant crops, but the field itself remains a tiny monument to what pioneers and Plains Native Americans would have been surrounded by in the 19th century and earlier. The Santa Fe Trail passed through the hunting grounds of multiple nations of Native Americans, and as Europeans traveled and hunted along the trail, they nearly eliminated the bison population, making traditional hunting much more difficult for the tribes who had traditionally hunted here. This and other factors led to conflict. In response, the U.S. government set up military forts along the trail to protect travelers and hopefully ease diplomatic relations with the Native Americans. Though this may have been the goal for some, it's not how it played out practically. In 1867, General Winfield Hancock was tasked not so much with making peace with the Cheyenne and Lakota, but rather rendering them placid somehow. Basically, make sure they would do whatever the government wanted. Hancock didn't have the authority to make peace treaties, though, so when he met with some Cheyenne and Lakota chiefs here on April 12, he decided to intimidate them rather than negotiating. In Hancock's mind, he had proved his mettle at Gettysburg just a few years before, so he talked up his military might to the tribal representatives. "You don't want to fight a war with me because you'll lose," and such. He ended the meeting saying he wanted to speak with the other chiefs, and he and his soldiers rode out to a large village of Cheyenne and Lakota. But just nearly 3 years earlier, the Cheyenne had seen a similar situation at Sand Creek near Fort Lyon, Colorado. There, despite holding a peace treaty, the U.S. Army had killed 250 Cheyenne and Arapaho. This massacre was still fresh in the memories of the Cheyenne, so when Hancock approached their village with his men, the village inhabitants fled. Hancock took this to mean that the Native Americans were uninterested in peace, so he burned the village behind them, and this started a cycle of reciprocal violence. The men participating in this violence on the side of the U.S. government would be based here at Fort Larned. From Fort Larned, the U.S. also distributed supplies to groups who had agreed to treaties. From 1861 to 1868, those groups included factions of the Kiowa, Comanche, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people. By 1868, the U.S. would move these groups of people elsewhere, and duties shifted for soldiers at the fort. During the 1870s, soldiers stationed at Fort Larned were tasked with protecting the construction of the railroad that would eventually render the Santa Fe Trail unnecessary. My original plan was to research the fort's history before visiting, but a short weather window rushed my first visit. I ended up going once with no knowledge, and then again the next week after I had done some reading. Clips from both of these trips will be interspersed, so please just ignore sudden weather and shirt changes. I did just hear a bugle, so I'm going towards the bugle. I mean, I should have guessed that, but the bugle was a speaker. The National Park Service has a really cool app that has a lot of info about all of the parks and self-guided walking tours and stuff like that. So I'm headed to stop number 1 on the building tour, and I'm gonna take some snapshots as I go. So shot number 1 is gonna be this view down the hallway, down this boardwalk here. There are repeating pillars on the left side. There are leading lines straight down the ceiling. There's that quote unquote bugle. And then the pillars are making nice shadows that kind of create a ladder pattern. So the first pillar is going to be just a little bit left of the left-hand third line in that grid. And then that way you can get a picture of its shadow as well. And I'm focusing about a third of the way into the composition, just so that everything in the picture is in focus front to back. And I'm just gonna check that real quick. Yeah, looks good. While I was researching, I actually found out that this photo that I took is an awful lot like this historical photo. This photo was meant to document the condition of the fort when it was being put onto the National Register of Historic Places. This is going to be shot number 2, I think. And the thing I like about it, there's basically nothing in this shot back here to suggest that it was taken any time other than like the 1880s. Where is my lens cap? Found it. It's right next to the dog poop bag. Okay, so this is going to be a fairly straightforward shot, except I want it to be panoramic because these buildings are pretty wide from left to right. So I'm at f8, ISO 100, 3, 2, 1. As I tour the place, I'm gonna go around the perimeter and I'm just gonna pop into every building. Then if I have time, there's a 1-mile loop that I'll do to kind of explore the grounds. Down here, this ravine is called the Oxbow. In super wet conditions, the river can kind of expand into this oxbow. And then there's an island in the middle of the Oxbow, and that is where originally they had their cemetery, and that's where the cemetery is represented today. Eventually they used it for storing hay and materials and things like that. But today, the cemetery is represented right there. The cemetery was later moved to the opposite side of the Pawnee Fork. Wrong shoes. Now today at Fort Larned, the old Santa Fe Trail serves as their nature walk, or at least part of it does. And it circles around the property. But this part right here is all part of the old Santa Fe Trail. And if you were to follow the trail as it was back then, this way, then you would eventually get to where I was for that earlier segment. This is what the fort would have looked like as you were riding in. Now this building had some barracks on the other side, and then here's kind of a mess hall situation. One thing I think is cool about the mess hall is the stove smack dab in the center of the room, which could be a bit of an injury risk. But also another thing I find interesting is that in these barracks, there are fire buckets just lining the inside. The barracks are really interesting. They've got all the uniform packs lining the room around the outside. They've got repeating rifles. So in the 1820s, the United States started trading with Mexico, and that's when the Santa Fe Trail kind of started as a way for trade to start between the United States and Mexico. As traders traveled along the Santa Fe Trail, they came into conflict with multiple tribes of Plains Indians because the trail went through traditional hunting grounds and the territory of multiple tribes of Plains Indians. So the United States Army started setting up forts along the trail to protect the commerce that was going on along the trail. And as you can imagine, there were lots of conflicts. Here's Head Ranger George Elmore to speak a bit more about the fort's history.
Fort Larned National Historic Site was a military base used by the United States Army. It was established in 1859. It was a series of tents and dugouts and temporary type buildings. And then about 1860, they started more real development, but Civil War, no money, so they made it out of adobe. The first stone building built by the military was the blockhouse, and that was put in 64 and completed in 65. And the rest of all these buildings that you see were built between 1866 and 1868. The Army decided to close the fort Due to the Indians being removed out of the area in the late 1870s, they deactivated it. They left a guard squad of soldiers here to protect it, and these guys were actually being under the supervision of the commanding officer at Fort Dodge. But finally the Army decided just to go ahead and turn it over to the Bureau of Land Management to be sold, and it became a working ranching operation for several years, and then it was purchased by the Frizzell family in 1902. It became a national landmark in '61, authorized by LBJ in '64, but it was actually purchased in 1966. Of course, during the farming era, they had to make alterations to make the more usable for a ranching operation. They put a gabled roof on top of both of the barracks, and the quartermaster building here, they elevated it a little bit, and they turned it into a giant hay barn. The other buildings, like the officers' quarters, were all left intact. You're walking on original floors. We even have original glass in some of the windows, which is amazing preservation.
Thanks so much for stopping to talk to me, George. All right, let's tour the rest of the buildings. This is the surgeon's office and pharmacy, and you can see the bed over here with just lantern light that would have been used for their surgeries and everything. Thankfully, we don't do it that way anymore. And then over there, you can see some of their implements, and it's, saws and chisels and things like that. Really makes it obvious why surgeons were called sawbones back in the day. And then, surgeons still use saws today, but you just don't see it because you're asleep. We've got a full room of hospital beds. There's an indoor bathroom here, I use that term charitably, that has, buckets that you do your business in. And over on the right side over there, there's multiple buckets with just seating over them. And you do your business in the bucket, and then in the morning, it was someone's job to empty the buckets. So this building is the bakery, and right now, there's some great light coming in from the window. I'm gonna see if I can get a good photo using this light. I'm gonna try keeping just the 24-70 on here still, but I might end up going a bit wide. Let's play around with this. That does look pretty cool. Focus over there. This is the carpentry and saddle shop, and right over there is a tool bench that has really good light streaming in through the windows. So I'm gonna zoom in on that tool bench and see if I can get a shot that kind of features the light. I don't think I actually filmed this space the other day. This would have been the blacksmith area. This whole building has blacksmith right here, carpenter and saddle and wheel shop, and then over there is the bakery. And I showed you those, but for some reason I don't think I stopped in here the other day. Originally, out this way, there were some trenches, but those trenches were too big to be manned by the small amount of people who were at this fort. To be adequately manned, it would need over 1,000 men. Those kinds of defenses weren't really needed because you didn't have a force with artillery attacking the fort or anything like that. So they needed a hardened building where everybody could fit inside, and then places where you could fire out from it. All these slits around the outside were made so that they could shoot out of them at any attackers. And those are all around this hexagonal building. This door on the floor is actually the door to an underground passageway that can be used for escape or for flanking or things like that. By the end of the fort's usefulness in the 1870s, the blockhouse was no longer needed, so it was actually converted into a jail. And that is signified here by some leg irons and a ball and chain. Just after the Civil War, a lot more soldiers came to Fort Larned because the soldiers were no longer tied up in the Civil War. And their old commissary, where they stored the food, was no longer large enough. So they built a new commissary, and this was the last sandstone building to be built on the fort. It was built in 1868. From that point on, the number of soldiers at Fort Larned consistently diminished, and once this was no longer needed as the commissary, it was turned into the fort school, because there were women and children at the fort as well, so they needed some place to school the youngins. We just talked about the new commissary that was turned into the school. This is the old commissary, the first one, that didn't turn out to be large enough. Ammunition was stored in this side. It wasn't a proper magazine, so it wasn't a very safe place to store it. It was better than the blockhouse because the blockhouse had a leaky roof. So they had to store it here so the gunpowder wouldn't get wet. Now, there's some good light happening across the yard here. So I'm gonna see if I can take advantage of that. We're getting some good sunlight hitting the flag and the cannon in the center, and then on the other side, the buildings over there are getting some nice light hitting them as well. So I'm gonna see if I can take advantage of this. Okay, I can hear them starting to lock up, but they're starting on the other side. So I think I have a bit of time. One of the photos that I liked was this building is at the end of a long walkway, and I liked getting that leading line of the walkway going straight to the center of this building over here with the evening light. It's backlit though, so we'll see if I can recover those shadows, but beggars can't be choosers right now. They are actively closing this second. This would have been the officers' quarters, and it looks much more like a traditional home would have back then. You can see dining room table with room for leisure time, decorations on the walls. I was turning around to walk out of the officers' quarters and I saw this shot through the door. You can see the new commissary through this door. So I exposed for the commissary outdoors and then used the door as just a frame to frame the building. And I think it looks pretty cool. This would have been the quartermaster issue room where soldiers could come in here and get boots, uniform, items of clothing, lanterns, that kind of thing, anything they needed from the warehouse. And this in here would have actually been the warehouse, the quartermaster warehouse, where soldiers could check things out. There's whale oil back there, boiled linseed, turpentine, sweet oil. I mean, obviously this is just a recreation, but some thought went into the kind of things that they would have kept in here at the time. Here we've got some really nice windows with the light hitting them, with the light hitting green shutters. So I'm gonna take a photo of that and then leave because they're closed. I didn't want to make it sound like they close weirdly early or anything. They close at 4:30, which is a fairly normal time. I just wanted to get some sunset photography done, and unfortunately that won't be able to happen because the sun sets in another 30 minutes or so. I may not have been able to get any sunset photos at Fort Larned, but I'm getting some good ones on the way home. You can see these pink clouds over the grain elevator right over here. I got some good photos of that. And then I'm getting a super wide angle shot with the road going off into the distance and then the sunset in the background. I like these curvy clouds in particular that are reflecting a lot of yellow. While frontier forts like this one often have nuanced histories involving troubling events, this fort is one of the best preserved American military forts from the Victorian period, and it does an excellent job of showing the experiences many soldiers would have had in the American West immediately following the Civil War. I'd like to thank the extremely friendly staff at the Fort Larned National Historical Site for their help. And if you like this type of content, there are several things that you can do to support me. First, please like this video and subscribe to my channel, and comment down below someplace you'd like me to visit in Kansas or in the surrounding states. Then, go back and watch my older videos. I've got some good ones. Finally, I also sell prints and do a lot of event photography, portraits, family photos, that kind of thing. You can find all of that at my website, mcclaryphotography.com. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.